Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem video. This is a postmortem of my chess blitz game number 22 that I just played and posted recently. In this game I played black. I played the Sicilian defense and my opponent countered with the Grand Prix attack. So let's see how this went. Knight c3 is a flexible move. He could still follow up with d4, so I play this knight c6 to stop that. And he goes into the Grand Prix attack with f4, which may have been the intention all along. It's sometimes just a transposition trick to get this knight out first instead of playing f4. So all proceeds normally according to the opening book till this point. Here I guess the normal move is knight d4. And actually I played this previously if you want to look at blitz game number 13 against the same opponent. And I talk a little bit about the theory there. So maybe I should have tried knight d4 this time. He seems to get a pretty good position here. But I went with my usual e6. He takes, doubles my pawns, and I develop my knight to e7, which is that idea of playing e6. You bring the knight over here to help protect this square and also to hold off the advancing pawns. So we continue making normal moves for a while. But this move was a mistake, actually. After I push the pawn and kick the knight, he can get a pretty good game by going after my weak c-pawn. He moves his knight there, attacking the pawn, and my queen can't come out to this square to defend because the bishop is covering it. So I'd be forced to play something like queen d6. So the computer gives a line like knight a4, queen d6, and then c4. And if I take en passant, he can recapture with the piece, and he leaves me with these doubled isolated pawns. And if I just leave the center there, then he's gained some space for his pieces, and he can reroute or undermine with the moves a3 and b4. Anyway, that's another way to play it. My opponent chose to go to knight e2. And that was the computer's second choice, so still a reasonable way to play this. And I'm trying to put pressure on these pawns in the center. With this sort of constitutes White's advantage in the game, as he has better control over these squares. And so I want to try and undermine him with moves like f5 here. And he naturally counterattacks. And then here, instead of exchanging, he might have been better off. The computer had two suggestions. One is queen c1 to defend the pawn this way, and the other is knight to e5, just putting the knight there, blocking my queen, and that also defends the pawn. So, but he decided to take instead, and then put the knight on e5. So it does give him an open file and a rook behind the knight. So there's some advantages to doing it this way. It gives me this square, I guess. Maybe that's the difference. If you look at the other position with this pawn sitting here on e4, it keeps my pieces out of these central squares, and so maybe White has slightly more influence in that position than when he exchanges. But it's still a pretty even game, and we continue on. And I didn't notice I made a mistake here. This rook was doing a useful job of defending the a-pawn, which is under attack by the bishop. Now the only piece that defends that a-pawn is the queen, and when the knight takes his bishop, the queen takes back, he can grab a pawn. So this last move here, when I played the rook from a to e8, that was a mistake. It basically loses a pawn. But I was a little concerned about the growing pressure over here, and I wanted to counter the pressure along the e-file, and I totally overlooked that I was losing that pawn. So anyway, he grabs right away. I take, and then he grabs the pawn. So he was obviously very alert to that tactic. I try and plug up this file with the knight, and also try and get some pressure on c2 here, try and get the pawn back. He goes after my other c-pawn. The pawn on c5 here is a weak pawn, and so I defend it. And now, instead of pushing the pawn, the computer recommends knight to f1 here, And the idea is that this knight is now pinned. He's got 2 pieces on it, and my queen was drawn away. I moved my queen up to defend the c-pawn, and now it's no longer defending the e8 square. So if this knight moves, he actually wins a piece. So by just increasing the pressure over here, he picks up a pawn at least. But instead he moved here, and now I get some counter pressure on the f-pawn. And the game is more or less balanced again. I want to take off some of those pieces. It makes it easier for me to defend the file, and also it removes a defender of the f-pawn. If you back up a second, when the knight came to this square, to g4, and attacked the rook moves sideways. Now this pawn is hanging on f4, but I can't take it right away because he can just win my knight, so I have to exchange off at least one pair of rooks, and now I'm free to take that pawn. And I do, and he grabs this pawn here, which is kind of a tricky tactic. But interesting, these kind of tactics occur a lot. So the queen is overworked. The queen is supporting the bishop here and the pawn here, and so his bishop can take that pawn, and if I take back, he takes my bishop. So I try to escape with a check, but he can take that, and because my queen is still hanging, I can't take his rook, so that didn't actually accomplish anything. I take the bishop, and I'm a pawn down again, but this c2 pawn looks kind of weak, so I double up and attack it. He goes forward. I thought he was trying to invade here, although actually I think the queen is better on the light squares. And I play knight takes c2. And so here's your first pop quiz. It's white's turn to move. What's a good move for white? I'll give you a few seconds to think about it, and if you want more time, you'll have to pause the video. Okay, have you spotted it yet? I'm going to tell you the answer now, so stop the video immediately if you want to think about it some. The answer is the queen goes back to c1 and sets up this pin of the knight. Now the knight is double attacked, and I don't have a way to bring up another defender, and I can't move the knight out of the way because the queen is not protected, and there's no square the knight can go to protect the queen. So that really just wins a whole piece, and I just missed that. Before I made the move, I actually noticed it during the game, but fortunately for me, my opponent played a different move. He brought his rook up to attack the queen and win this pawn over here. And I come forward, and now the position is very double-edged. I'm trying to make threats against his king, and he's invading the territory around my king. In particular, this pawn is kind of weak, and once this pawn goes, this square is available for his queen to check my king on that diagonal, and that'll be a nasty check to deal with. So he brings his queen back to attack this pawn. I bring my knight to this square to at least defend against a check after the queen takes pawn. We'll defend against the check from d5. And I also have ideas of threatening his king, so I'm just trying to... if the queen goes away from this square, for example, I can put my queen here and try and gang up on g2 there. So he goes after this weak c-pawn, which is very logical. And I noticed that his outside a-pawn was hanging, so I thought, well, I should grab that because that becomes a menace at some point. I didn't want it to get too far. And now he should just grab the pawn with his rook. What he does is he takes with his queen instead, and this is a terrible mistake. And I'll give you guys a few seconds to think about why this is a mistake. Okay, I'm going to tell you the answer. My queen, even though I had moved it away from this square, it was here, I moved it to this square. But it's still on this diagonal and can come all the way back to e1 here and deliver a check. And now his king can't run away, and if the knight comes here, then it's queen takes knight as mate. So that's just a mate in one. So my opponent resigned here. Let's back up, and here, now let's put on the engine. The computer thinks black is slightly better here, so 0.74. knight f1. I was wondering about the move rook takes c6. That's sort of the logical follow-up to the way he's been playing. It says I have rook e8 here, or queen a1 check. What I was wondering about is this line, queen a1 check, knight f1. Okay, I guess it's not true. I was thinking maybe I could just exchange everything out and then go after this pawn here. So, for example, sorry, let's back up. Queen takes here, check, forces queen takes f1, knight takes, king takes, and then rook here hitting this pawn. He just plays rook to c4, going after my pawn. I take here. He takes here. It looks like this would be a draw. So that would be one way the game might have gone. Let's see, in the computer's recommendation, after rook takes c6 is not to exchange out. That's kind of interesting. But it says the best for white is knight f1, queen a1, and b4, and rook to c8, supporting this pawn. So it's a game. It looks like white has, or black has a one pawn advantage. 1, 2, yeah, and I am a pawn up here. So nothing more than that, just a pawn. So the game would definitely continue at that point. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. And leave any comments you have in the section below. Thanks. Bye.